this next stepping stone on the way to Easter, I've brought you here to see this amazing sculpture called Assembly. It's on the wall of St Rollott's Church in Sighthill in Glasgow, where I'm the minister. And as you can see, it's made up of many different kinds of cross. The cross, of course, has been a symbol of Christian belief for many centuries now, and it's intrinsically tied to the Easter story, when on Good Friday our Lord Jesus was crucified. We're invited to stop just for a moment today and to consider the cross, because one day when Jesus was teaching a whole crowd of people and his disciples, he said these words to them: "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and the sake of the gospel will save it." Now, these are pretty striking words. And as you read through the Gospel of Mark and you come to these words in chapter 9, you see that this is really where Jesus raises the bar of discipleship. Following him, it's not easy. It's not an easy option. It never is. And it can't be described as being a crutch, as some skeptics would like to infer, for it's demanding. Discipleship is where the rubber hits the road, or in this case, where the wood hits the shoulder. Because the picture is of the condemned man carrying his cross, the very means of his execution. The picture is also of denial, a denial of our own rights. It's not simply what a lot of us choose to do in Lent and give up some chocolate or come off Facebook for 40 days or however long it may be. It's much more than that. It's not just to do without something. Denying oneself is far more radical than that. To deny oneself is to renounce self as the dominant element in life. It's to replace ourselves with God in Christ as the object of our affection. It's to put the divine will before self-will. Do you see how deep and radical this denial is? It's dying to sin and selfishness, and it's a process that the believer in Jesus goes through every single day of life as we seek to put Christ first in our lives. This is why discipleship is so radical, following Jesus so challenging. It's more than words, it's more than what we say we believe. It's about living that out every day of our lives, consistently denying ourselves. This is, I think, why the cross is so offensive to many, because it demands from us a denial that goes right to the very heart of who we are as people, selfish beings by nature. And as if that weren't challenging enough, along with that is the call to carry a cross, the call to be willing to suffer for Jesus and for others. And it's funny, isn't it, how we can easily make light of these sayings of Jesus. We sometimes say that putting up with nuisance neighbours or putting up with the annoying and irritating habits of our husband or wife or children is the cross we have to bear in life. And yet Jesus' words go far deeper than that. And this invitation to discipleship is actually an invitation to sacrificial suffering, a call that asks us to be willing even to give up our life for the sake of being able to follow him. For the cross in his day was a symbol that life was about to be lost. In the West, we've been so protected from this kind of radical discipleship. Few of us would ever imagine that being a Christian would lead to us losing our lives for him. And yet that's what so many of our brothers and sisters around the world face daily. The organisation Open Doors alerts us to the fact that 11 Christians lose their life every day because of their decision to follow Jesus. That's a sobering statistic. The way of Christian discipleship is not something we could ever do without leaning wholly on Christ, who walked that path before us, leaning on Jesus, who knew the pain and the agony of such a radical commitment. His cross reminds us of that. After hearing these words of Jesus, though, we might wonder if following him is worth it, if it's worth the sacrifice, the challenge, the denial of self. Well, I've been walking this path with Jesus now for over 30 years, and I can tell you that I wouldn't change it for anything. Strangely, it's in losing our life for Jesus and the gospel that we begin to realise we actually gain and save our lives. True freedom, it lies in commitment to him. I came across these words of Donald English, and I think they sum this up quite well. He wrote, "If you clutch your life wholly to yourself, protecting it against all others, asserting all your needs, rights and privileges, you lose your life, because it isn't life any longer. If, however, you acknowledge that life is not yours by right, but is a privilege, and that it's to be lived in the love that the gospel story reveals, that self-giving love, then you possess life wholly. There's now nothing to lose and everything to gain." And so this way of radical discipleship becomes a way of radical blessing, and it becomes what Jesus promises elsewhere, life in all its fullness. And so this wall of crosses, it reminds me not only of the cross of Christ, where he laid down his life for us, but also it reminds me of the call to follow him every day with that same willingness to sacrifice for the sake of others. This sculpture, it points me to the way of discipleship, to take up my cross and follow him.